Um, well, welcome everyone. I see of the participants here, I know Colby and Ron. Deborah and Jacqueline, I don't know you personally. Can you tell me a little bit more about your background? So you work with Colby and Ron, Deborah, great. And who else do we have? Where's my chat function? There we go. Corporate relations. Okay, great. So we have mostly admin folks on the line, which is perfectly fine. So the GeorgeSquared program is in our 11th year. It was started as a collaboration between the Georgetown School of Medicine and George Mason in the late, the conversations were in the late 2000s. Some folks like Ron certainly predate me, so they may know more of the deep history, but the basic idea was that at that point in time, there was a conversation about developing a medical school on the Manassas campus, then called the Prince William campus. The idea there was that Mason would be best served, but first off, Northern Virginia was the best location for such, and that Mason would be best served by collaborating with an institution that already had a medical school, not a public institution, but rather a private institution. And the idea of developing such form, but the idea was to build a step ladder, if you will, by fleshing out the graduate level biomedical resources at George Mason, and the Manassas campus was a prime locale for that, given space considerations and other realities. Now that medical school effort took a back seat for a while, but the idea of developing the graduate level resources stayed. So a program was developed, which was called the Advanced Biomedical Sciences Graduate Certificate. The idea is that there are a lot of students out there who either apply to medical school and fall a little short, or recognize that they're a little bit short to begin with. So this notion of enhancing their academic record has been in place for about 40 to 50 years. Georgetown actually has the first implementation of this, a program called the Special Masters in Physiology. So using that pedagogical model and idea and developing a comparable program in partnership with Mason was the idea. And this was a slightly different population than the one served by the Special Masters program. Basically, students who are a step or two behind the students who would go to that program. They lack a strong standardized test score. For medical school, that would be the MCAT. For dental score, that would be the DAT. And then there are a few others for other tracks, such as physician's assistants. So the idea here was to develop a program at the graduate level to help students retool academically, better prepare themselves for medical or dental school, and include test preparation as part of the program. The program was joined with another master's level program about 2 years later, but after 4 years, that was removed from the palette. And so we once again have but one program, academic program, a graduate certificate program, which is based on a full master's degree, but not a full master's degree in and of itself. The majority of our students continue on for a full master's degree after they finish their certificate, and they would go to either Georgetown or George Mason to complete that full master's degree. And there's several options there. The idea is that we see that students sometimes go from a strong high school record and then get slammed in college. And if you don't get off to the right start in college, you may be too far behind to get anywhere in terms of admissions to medical or dental school. So we try to recover that spark, rebuild their academics, put them through a pretty rigorous curriculum, and give them a lot of advising, preparing for the medical dental school application process. And in doing so, we have been, in the long run, able to see about 2/3 of our students successfully admitted to medical or dental school we're now using a 3-year window after graduation from the program. But that compares with a national average of about 50% of all applicants getting into a medical or dental school somewhere. And selective schools will see 80+%. Less selective schools will see lower percentage success rates. But in that, we're able to take students who were not successful in the first round, maybe a potential 5 to 10% success, and translate that into a 60+% success rate. I think we're doing a reasonable job of improving their prospects and seeing them on to a successful career. Now, those who don't make it go into other areas like nursing or research or some other track, but we also try to help those students. It isn't just the ones who get into medical or dental school. We do a number of things at the co-curricular level, some hands-on. The Army comes in and recruits, and in doing so, they do a suture clinic. They come in with little rubber slabs of fake skin, and the students practice suturing. We have CPR instruction in normal years. This year's different in a number of ways. We make use of a lot of campus resources like the ropes course with the EDGE program. So we put the students through a leadership training. It's optional in that case, but the majority pursue it. A lot of recruiters come to campus to recruit for medical and dental school. We have a lot of speakers, try to tap folks like Lance Leota, Chip Petrocoin, Charlie Bailey when he was around. They would all come and talk to our students. So we try to bring in campus resources as much as possible, but really acclimate the students to the idea that this is what it takes to get into and succeed in medical and dental school. So a quick run through who we are and what we do. Kristen is our assistant director. She's been with us, this is her second round of Mason, so she knows some of the institutional realities, but she's been in the business for a while now and has been with us for a couple of years. So doing a great job in being one of the interfaces with our applicants and our current students and our alumni. And so with that, any questions I can answer or any comments you want to add, Kristen?
Sounds about right. I have a little one here, so I'm just going to keep myself muted.
So any questions, James, Michael, Carrie, Ron, Jacqueline, Deborah, anything I could answer? We are always looking for more connections. So Jacqueline, for instance, if you have relations in the healthcare industry and you have recruiters or you have people who might be useful speakers just to talk about careers in medicine, that would all be incredibly helpful. Let's see. Well, greatest impact being virtual. So it's allowed us to develop more resources and more opportunities. It's allowed us to kind of ground truth a lot of our systems. And what it's also done is allowed us to fully develop a fully online version of the curriculum, which we will be offering moving forward. As we continue into subsequent years, we'll be able to reach a broader audience, those who might be in other parts of the country or world who don't want to come to Manassas or Virginia. It might be those who have just other realities. We'll be able to offer this. Now it's forced us to do certain things, modify certain things. So we have what we call a hybrid flipped curriculum where there's the traditional lecture. We record all those, make those recordings available to everyone, but some students opt to do a more intensive dive into in a small group learning environment where it's more interactive and more participatory. So that we're modifying in an online version. So the students come to a small group online session to more deeply explore the material. And that's how we've modified our delivery so that we have a more robust, fully online version of the curriculum. Ooh, lots of questions here. We will retain a hybrid model. We had the what we call hybrid flipped model already in place for 3 years, 4 years before the pandemic, where the students watched recordings and then came to a small group discussion on site. But then we also will be delivering that in a fully online version where they'll view recordings of the lectures or perhaps live synchronous lecture viewing, followed by a small group discussion. It's just that it'll be all online. And therefore, some of the nuances of how do you read full body language when all you see is the neck up, that kind of stuff. James, I can see a little bit more of you from maybe the mid torso up, but I think you get the idea. We find potential students by a lot of outreach. It was one of the first things I did when I came on board 6 years ago is really aggressively pursued our outreach and recruiting efforts. We went to a lot of fairs. We went to a lot of individual schools. We started doing a lot of online events last year, well before the pandemic, but now we're doing an online info session almost every week. We invite a lot of recruiters in. So one of our good sources of students is actually the medical schools themselves, because the medical school sees an applicant and they say, you're almost there, but not quite. Why don't you pursue a program such as ours? And that gives us the idea that this student can make it if they just put in a little more effort, and we can help them and actually implement that effort and give them the content. And those students tend to have a really good success rate on the end. Okay, so Michael asks how do folks apply. Well, we go through the current TargetX Mason application system, but we're actively pursuing membership in kind of a common app type of system for comparable post-baccalaureate programs. And we're just trying to work through the the realities of the bureaucracy of getting that fully implemented. But that we hope will greatly increase our numbers. We did go down this year, notably, and I think part of it is because of the pandemic. There was an 18% increase in applications to medical school this year, partly because medical schools were implying that they were going to look, quote, more holistically, meaning not so much at the MCAT scores. But what it really meant was that students said, oh, you're not going to look at my MCAT score, and they applied. And so there's an increase in the number of applicants, but there's no increase in the number of seats. So we expect a lot of people getting rejection letters this year. Unfortunately, some of our graduates, but those who get rejected, who didn't consider a program like this, may now consider such a program because they didn't get in. So they need something to beef up their applications. Yes, so Jacqueline, for our program, we need the students to have all of their undergraduate prerequisites completed and otherwise be eligible to apply to medical school, but have to really rework their academic foundation. Our average incoming GPA this past year was a 3.15 overall and a 2.9 science GPA properly calculated. What I mean by that is we count all attempts at a course. So repeated courses at many institutions are subject to a grade forgiveness policy where it's only the second or even the third attempt that counts on the calculated GPA. Medical schools don't care. They calculate every single attempt. So most GPAs, many GPAs on a medical school application are lower than what the undergraduate institution actually calculated. So we calculate those in-house and work with those. Nominally, we have a 3.0 minimum, but we do take a few students who are below a 3.0. We look beyond just the GPA, look to see, is there some real reason why they have a 2.9? And is this something we can work with? Decent amount of clinical and volunteer experience, because medical schools want to know that you know what you're asking to get into. And we want that beforehand because they won't have a whole lot of time to develop it while they're in the program. We do provide some clinical and volunteer opportunities, but it's minimal, just enough to keep your feet wet, not enough to really establish a solid foundation. Let's see, it's a 9-month program. Students start in late August, they finish up in one academic year. The majority continue on for the full master's degree, and many will do so at Georgetown. They can do so over the summer, so they can finish with a full 30-credit master's degree in 12 months' time. They wrap it up in August. And that's the standard model, but we have a lot of other alternative pathways. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm just looking at some of these comments here. Jacqueline, again, with regard to your connection with corporate relations, we do try to help students in that year after they finish the program, because most students, very few are in the application cycle for medical school while they're in the program. Many, if not most, will apply after they've finished. So since the admissions to medical and dental school is a year-long process, they need to be doing something next academic year while they're waiting to hear back, waiting for interviews or what have you. Even if they're admitted, they won't be starting until the following fall. So students in the program now will apply this summer, hopefully be interviewing this fall, and then matriculate medical school next year, 2022, in late summer. So what we try to do is help them find meaningful experiences in that subsequent year. It might be a master's degree, it might be employment, it might be some other track, a research opportunity, something like that. A good number of students need employment to pay down student loan debt or whatever, but to the degree they can keep connecting with the healthcare industry, working as a scribe, working as a dental or medical assistant, anything like that, all the better. It just shows that continuous improvement, this idea that you need some hands-on, you need some real world experience, you need the academic foundation, you need the whole package. So we try to help with that. So if you have a way of connecting us with anyone really in the healthcare industry who might be a good lead for employment in that year gap period, or even who can just talk about the healthcare industry. We have two seminars, one in the fall, one in the spring, that we use to talk about study skill development, but we also use them to talk about big issues like medical ethics, or Alonso Aguirre came in and talked about zoonotic diseases this week, which he's done for the past several years. It's just that now it's really important with COVID-19. And he's actually published on the topic. Badu is coming in next week to talk about modeling of COVID. We have a few other speakers coming in about equity and healthcare access, things of that sort. But if someone wants to come in and talk about what is it like to be a hospital administrator and how do you manage healthcare from that perspective, we're all ears. We like to hear that kind of thing because we want to prepare students to be academically ready, but also real world ready with this notion of how the system actually works. Someone came in and talked about the role of clinical trials a couple of weeks ago. They're part of the healthcare system, so we want students to be aware of that. What do we have? So Kristen's answered a bunch of these questions. Good. Any other questions I can address or answer here? What trends we're seeing need for medical professionals of any sort? Well, there's always a push for diversity, and very coincidentally, we are the most diverse program of any kind in the College of Science. We have roughly 50 to 55% of our student body is the traditional identified underrepresented minorities, which are African Americans and Latinos. We have a very high percentage of first generation Americans. We have very high percentage of first generation college students. We have a pretty decent amount of socioeconomic diversity. It's just it's much harder to track and quantify. But the idea here is that we're trying to prepare this body of individuals, both by incorporating them into the program, but by also really emphasizing a collaborative and cooperative environment. They've all been through drink from a fire hose, undergraduate, pre-med, compete for the A in organic chemistry environment. They don't need to repeat that. We need to really develop their foundations, which includes an element of confidence and this notion of inclusiveness, this idea that they're all in the same boat. They don't need to be competing anymore. They're all there to help each other. Sure, we want them to be strong, and if a little competition helps you get there, so be it. But by sharing the experience, I think that all students get to understand where the others are coming from, and that diversity. And I can go off on the definition of diversity, but the idea is that if we have these different walks of life represented in this program, and they're meant to be part of one unit whole, then when they do go out and apply to medical school, they'll bring that experience along with them. They'll understand what these different backgrounds mean in terms of different experiences with regard to access to healthcare, or different experiences with regard to how should we be incorporating diversity data into the healthcare process. All those kinds of things are important. So I think that one of the big trends, is to diversify the healthcare industry at all levels. We know there are a lot of women in nursing, but we need more diversity in that regard. Looking at physicians and dentists, same story. We just need to add to that. And I would argue that we provide more students of this diverse background than any comparable program in the country. I've seen no other program unless it's a program that specifically recruits minorities, and there's special funds and monies for that. But really, that's one of the big things. A lot of other things like telemedicine, big push. I think we need to do that. So we try to incorporate some digital aids and digital approaches in the classroom. Clearly, going online has helped become familiar with that. But um, there are both digital learning aids, but also techniques and methods and technologies that are used in telemedicine. So yeah, teaching someone how to take their own vitals, blood pressure, temperature, et cetera, and then s- uh, convey that electronically to whatever the database is or whatever the online physician is. You need to have an accurate read if the person's taking their own vitals. So being able to teach someone how to do that is part of incorporating digital approaches to the delivery of healthcare. Let's see. Um, yep. Okay. So we seem to have an echo in there with regard to that question. Any other questions? Training. Yep. So we do a little bit of that, but it's something which I really want to add to the program. So if anyone knows a resource out there that's engaged in telemedicine and wants to work with us, we're all ears on that one. A little workshop on telemedicine, the tools, the techniques, the realities, all of that. We would enjoy having that included into the program. Simulations, we can consider simulations for sure. I have explored the idea of bringing in a little bit of technology like less invasive, like a sonogram or something of that sort. We just, for a couple of reasons, we can explore the idea of digital anatomy or digital cadavers or things of that sort. We have some tools already by virtue of the Mason and the Georgetown libraries, but one thing we have done is work with the with USUS. We used to do a few tours of the facilities in Bethesda, and they have kind of a combat uh, um, field station, like a MASH unit, if you will, that is simulated. And they're training military people with the facility, but our students got to explore this, where you had gunfire and everything else going on while you're bringing in bloody bodies and trying to treat them. So simulations of that sort, we're all for it. It's we if there's connections there, James, you have connections, we would really like to have that included in the program.
Awesome.
Uh,
Well, I think
so
we're almost to 12:30, so I know we're getting ready to shift gears. So I figured simulations would be a great place to talk because now